feel like a radio announcer now. I do. Good evening.
They do sound good. Holy cow.
Yeah, that's sensitive. That's impressive. All right, good evening, everyone. It is 5 p.m. on Monday, February 14th, 2022. I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Wausau Board of Education. Ms. Peck, if you would do attendance, please.
Jim Boucher,
Here.
John Creasher,
Here.
Kyle Lowe, Cody Nicolai,
Here.
Jane Roosh, here. Lance Trollope,
Here.
Karen Vandenberg, here. Lee Webster, here. Pat McKee.
Here. All right, thank you. If we'd all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, number 4, reading of the mission statement. It is the mission of the Wausau School District to advance student learning, achievement, and success. On to item 5, public and student comment. Pardon? Yeah. All right, thank you. All right, we do have a few folks signed up for public comment tonight, and as is customary, I'd just like to read a few reminders. Comments, the presenters and participants making comment shall do so after announcing their name, address, and/or group affiliation. Each statement by a participant will be limited to 3 minutes in duration. Clerk Peck will have time cards for everyone, so please keep in mind where you're at during the 3 minutes, and we will stick to a hard 3 minutes in fairness to everybody. Speakers shall direct all comments to the board and not to individual staff or other participants. Speakers bear the personal risk if anything he or she says during the public comment period is defamatory, slanderous, or otherwise harmful to another individual. And finally, the presiding officer may call for a recess or adjournment to another time when the lack of public decorum so interferes with the orderly conduct of the meeting as to warrant such action. And I don't think we'll have an issue with time length tonight. So, our first speaker tonight is Bruce Grau.
I don't know how close this should be. Is this fine right there? Well, I want to address the whole board, but I'm only looking at 4 people. You should move this over a little, maybe, huh? It's kind of skewed to the right. So I'm Bruce Grau. I'm a member of the Poor People's Campaign, and I live in Wausau, 1115 North 10th Street. Water. I'm going to talk about water. Water is life. We can go weeks without food, but maybe a week tops without water. Children are particularly dependent on water. They hold the highest percentage of body water per body weight than at any other stage in our life cycle. This also makes them particularly sensitive to waterborne contaminants such as PFAS and PFAS. It can be even more dramatic in unborn children. PFAS and PFAS is the forever chemical equivalent to the forever metal, lead, in children. Once it's in, it never gets out. The levels found in all of our city wells exceed the proposed limit by the Wisconsin DNR and all states surrounding Wisconsin. These chemicals are strongly associated with immune response suppression, including a decreased response to immunizations. Kidney, testicular cancer, low birth weights, preeclampsia, imbalanced hormone levels, elevated cholesterol, hypothyroid state, skin allergies, asthma, and liver abnormalities, to name quite a few. Above any other function, you as school board perform keeping kids safe and the staff safe in school ranks as your highest priority. Eliminating access to contaminated water by turning off the bubblers is a good step, but only if you're able to provide an adequate supply of purified water. And start with those most challenged to obtain water, such as low income and families with disabilities. Cost is irrelevant, and your creative abilities should be brought to full bear. In the short run, it may mean purchasing water or filling water containers with the water provided by the faucets in the kitchens that filter through reverse osmosis systems. For the long run, all sources of drinking water in schools need to be filtered for forever chemicals, currently known groundwater contaminants that we know exist in Wausau, such as dioxin, arsenic, thallium, as well as anticipating a growing list of toxins as the city moves to identify and rectify all the poisons leached into our environment by activities of industry and business. Water is life, and clean water is our right. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening, Joanna Reyes.
Hello, my name is Joanna Reyes, and I live on the west side of Wausau. As I debated last night about the facts and statistics I would use to support my public comment on the elementary school mask agenda being discussed today, my husband comes down before the Super Bowl halftime show started and turned the TV on so I could watch the halftime performance. As a former Angelino born and raised in Southern California, the halftime show performers were a huge part of the music culture during my teenage years. As I watched the performance, I couldn't help but see the maskless celebrities and gamegoers. I thought to myself, how is this okay during a time when we keep being told we are in a pandemic? The disgrace of a governor in California has passed some of the most strictest restrictions on its tax-paying citizens in the name of safety. How is this okay when children still have to be masked all day while they are in school? I lived the horror in the beginning of the pandemic in Los Angeles, California, and watched as we were told to mask up, stay in, as homeless people roamed the streets maskless and living their lives as if nothing was going on. There was a point in which we even had a curfew. I think the Hollywood performance by the elites, celebrities, and gamegoers has shown us that this masking in the name of health has come to an end. The performance by the elites, celebrities, and politicians last night is proof enough to end this debate. It is time to end the mask debate, make it optional, and move forward with strategic ways to help our children's education excel. Help them with their mental health that has been suffering since before this pandemic. We need to discuss providing the best environment for our students to thrive in. Talk about declining enrollment, overabundance of elementary schools, schools that need upgrading, and teachers that need more support. I had a small discussion with local mothers that want more special ed teacher support and training. Not one of those mothers expressed a concern for other kids not masking around their children. Not one mentioned safety concerns regarding COVID or Omicron. We as parents are fed up with the mask back and forth discussion. It is time to unmask the children and use our energy to discuss their education. I strongly encourage the board to lift the mask mandate and move forward with discussing what really matters, our children's education and mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker this evening, David Wright?
My name is David Wright. I live in Rochelle. I'm not a resident of your school district, but my son has been recently moved to your school district. I'm here as an advocate for him. He is a child with a disability, and since he's been moved to this district, he's been coming back to me because he lives in a split home with bruises on him. And I've tried to go through the channels at the schools And it feels like I get a dog and pony show and that it's falling on deaf ears. And now that he came back to me 3 times in 6 days of school, that he was in this particular school in your district, he had bruises on his body when he came home to me that he did not have when he was taken to school. And I think this is something that needs to be addressed, whether it's the capabilities of the staff that are at hand or the inadequacies of the amount of staff you have to care for my child. He is 100% quadriplegic, and everything has to be done for him. And I find this as unacceptable. The district that he was in before never, ever had an issue like this before. I personally went to a large school district, and when he was moved here, I knew that was, my opinion, not going to be in the best interest of him because more time was spent with him in the district that he was in, but it raises concerns for me. And I don't feel that anybody at that particular institution takes me seriously. And I'm not going to lay down. I'm going to continue to fight. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and our next speaker is Corey Sillers.
Good evening. Name's Corey Sillers, 227-229 Bobolink Avenue, Town of Rib Mountain, freshman and senior at Wausau West. I come to talk to you tonight. I would oppose John Marshall becoming a historic building due to the fact that the district will continue their discussions on the best route for the future of our elementary schools. The district already has Grant Elementary with that historic designation, which may cause a challenge for us in the future as the discussions continue. I am in support of the changes and additions proposed in the April referendum question, especially the items at Wausau West. As a former member of the West Band and Drama Clubs, the remodeling of the auditorium and music departments is very much needed for the students to gain a better experience with those activities. I encourage the Wausau families to learn about the referendum and all the positive improvements that will come with the passing of it. And remember that we will continue the discussions to find the best path for our students. Finally, with the leadership of one very enthusiastic sports dad, there's a small group of families that are working towards raising private funding to use to upgrade the sports fields mainly at Wausau West. If your family wants to help out, or if you have a student in those sports, please try to contact myself or the coaches at West so you can join our cause. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, that is our final speaker for the evening. So on to agenda item number 6, approval of the consent agenda. This is an action item. Approval tonight will include appointments, separations, leaves of absence, retirements, minutes from the regular session of the January 10th, 2022 meeting, payment of bills and the budget status and investment reports, donations to the district. This month include those from the Green Heck Group, Poland Chiropractic, Margaret and Jim Schultz, an anonymous donor, Covantage Cares, Green Heck Foundation, Pilgrim Lutheran Church, Shooting Metals, Jim Nick, and Jim Zelenka. I would seek a motion to approve the consent agenda with great gratitude for those that donated to the district.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 7, Dr. Hiltz, elementary masking, possible action.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we had a request from board members to add this to our agenda, and so I'll just reiterate for folks that currently the practice at our elementary schools is once there's a positive case identified in a classroom, the students and the teacher in that classroom are required to mask for 5 days. So that's our current status. And like I said, there is a request to review this, so we're open up for conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'll call a motion right away so we can get the conversation going. The motion will be to make masks optional regardless of a positive case in all elementary schools.
Okay, we have a first?
Second.
We have a first and a second. All right. Comments or questions? Okay.
Yeah, I just, I think, like others probably, I've been comparing the COVID rates on our dashboard with the schools that were mandatory masks, like Marshfield Point and Rapids, and I really started the year off doing it every single day, looking to see if there was going to be a difference, and then there wasn't, and there wasn't, and there wasn't, and so then lately, for the last few months, I've just been doing it once a week. And again, it's every week. We haven't even been the high of the 4 in 3 months. We're not always the lowest, but we haven't yet been the highest. And so I don't love the timing of it, just because I think things are going okay and it would be a smoother transition at the end of the year. But looking at that evidence, I just don't see that it's making a difference either. So I think it makes sense.
Okay. Any other comments or questions on this? All right, hearing none, we have a first and a second. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you. On to the next item under old and recurring business. At the January Education Operations Committee meeting, Chris Nyman, Jennifer Rauscher, Julie Schell, and the Achievement Gap Reduction Campus Principals presented mid-year student achievement and growth data. Campus principals were available to discuss specific questions regarding achievement growth data and which AGR strategies were implemented in kindergarten, first, second, and third grade classrooms. The team also shared district-level achievement and growth data, as well as next steps towards performance objectives identified in the achievement goal A4 in the district strategic plan. This was informational only, no action required. I don't believe there's any updates on that. Okay. Okay, and the second item, at the January Education Operations Committee meeting, Chief Finance and Business Officer Bob Test presented a summary report presenting all legal counsel expenses incurred during the second quarter of 2021-2022. The report is broken down by firm and type of legal advice sought. This is a written report, and also this is informational only. It does not require any action. On to new business. And this is an action item. Ms. White will be presenting a proposed change to the date of the Wausau West 2022 graduation.
Good evening, board members. Yes, I am bringing a motion to you, request to change Wausau West's graduation date due to a scheduling conflict. The date that was originally proposed in the calendar happens to be the same day as the regional track meet that is also being hosted at Wausau West. And what we don't want to have happen is students to feel like they have to choose between that regional track meet and attending their graduation. So in working with the staff at Wausau West, what they are proposing is to move graduation to Sunday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. It would still be held at Tom Field, as that is the day most of the staff are available, and there are no scheduling conflicts on that day. So with that, I would answer any questions, and Principal Jeb Steckbauer is here as well to answer any questions.
I have just a comment. Having been in those situations and as an athletic director, can't hear me, I guess. Got to get used to this now. All right, now you can probably really hear me. Sorry about that. I will back up a little bit. Having been in those situations, those dates by the WIAA are planned ahead of time. There really shouldn't be a reason why we even have to have you come back to us to change the graduation. So my encouragement would be have your athletic directors make sure that they're taking a look at all the possible conflicts that may be taking place with athletics, so you don't have to do this because they're out there.
Yeah, good point. We missed this one. What we're finding though is this is a big one that involves a lot of kids, and not only that, facilities conflict, so it's kind of a double whammy. But what we're finding is Wednesday is pretty much the struggle having students have to pick, you know, do I let my team down or do I show up for graduation that I've been working for all these years? And I think that's really important. So I think moving forward, we have to certainly do a better job of vetting those dates, but also we may have to, tradition in Wausau has been east and west, was Tuesday, Wednesday, we flip-flop for a while, then we started discovering conflicts on Tuesday. Wednesday's pretty good. Once in a while, there's a lacrosse possibility of conflict, but generally Wednesday's pretty good. We went to Wednesday, Thursday, and it just seems like there's always something that, and so we may be looking to this further discussions on maybe we can. So appreciate your patience on this.
Jeb, just one tactical question. I assume the rain venue would be the field house at West. Given that the track meet is the next day, is there any preparation for track that might get in the way of having to accommodate all those people in the field house?
No, we're
Okay.
confident that if that was a biggie for the facilities one. If we rained out on, if we had rain, we couldn't have it on the outside. To have both of those large events at the school campus would have been really difficult.
Right.
So Sunday, that shouldn't bother
Okay.
us. We can get it cleaned up and ready to roll.
Okay.
Were the parents told about this? Because I see nobody came up to complain about it, and nobody wrote to me anyway. So if the parents are fine with it,
I can tell you that they weren't told of the date, but I put in our last newsletter that we have a conflict and we're going to get them the date as soon as we.
Good.
okay, so they don't know it could be a Sunday. Okay, so there may be a issue with that. And this has been happening since I've been on the board, so maybe
Yeah.
a permanent change to a weekend might be consideration?
Yeah, I know that there's many schools in the state of Wisconsin, many high schools that actually go Sunday of Memorial Day weekend, sometimes Friday of Memorial Day weekend. And I know last year I asked for our parents to keep the rain date open for Saturday and Sunday of Memorial weekend. We pushed back saying, hey, don't you know that's Memorial Day weekend? And we needed kind of fortunately, we didn't need the rain dates, but we need to at least have some in place at that time.
Yeah, and our two big high schools are the ones that would have those conflicts. Our other graduations would not have. So there's more than just East and West graduations.
No, it's a good point. Okay, anything else?
I guess I just want to say, I do support the change. I have heard from a few parents, probably because I have a senior graduating impacted by the date change. And it's a no-win situation. There will be people who are upset and frustrated with the change of date. There's no doubt that will happen. Just like there'll be people that will be really upset if the date doesn't change, because they're going to be forced to have to choose between graduation and an important track event. And so I totally support the change, but understand it's a really impossible situation. So I'm glad that moving forward, hopefully we'll be able to avoid it. But I think ultimately we have to not have a conflict that rules out some kids from even participating, although I know it will impact people's long-planned events potentially. So anyway.
Okay, with that, I am seeking a motion to move Wausau West's 2022 graduation date from the evening of Monday, May 23rd to Sunday, May 22nd at 2 p.m. Because of the aforementioned scheduling conflict.
So moved.
We have a
Second.
first and a second. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you,
Thank you.
Diana. Okay, our next item. The WASA, and this is an action item as well, and it was addressed by one of our public speakers earlier tonight, so just to expand on it, and the action item is really for the board to take a position relative to the potential action regarding John Marshall. The Wausau School Board understands the Wausau Historic Preservation Commission has an interest in identifying John Marshall Elementary as a local historic landmark. While we understand the commission's interest, the Wausau School Board does not support the approval of this action at this time. The district will soon be engaging in a community conversation regarding the structure of our elementary schools and do not wish to have our options limited by this designation. So before we get into discussion, let me state the motion, because I believe there's going to be some questions. So the motion will be, I would move to inform the Wausau Historic Preservation Commission, the Wausau Planning Commission, and the Wausau Common Council of the Wausau School Board's desire to leave John Marshall Elementary School off the list of local historical landmarks until we have an opportunity to conclude a district and community study of the structure of all elementary schools. Need a first and a second.
I'll second that, or I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I'll second.
All right, we have a first and a second. Okay, questions, comments?
I have plenty to say. I think that they did this to us, to the district with Grant School, and they will probably do it with John Marshall. But I think when it comes time for us to do renovations in those buildings, we should be getting assistance from these groups because it's much more expensive to do the renovations. We can't touch the outside of the building. And to just do inside work to make it the best we can for our kids to learn is much more expensive when you are locked into that facade. And I think these organizations should keep that in mind.
It also prevents us from including in our discussions the possibility of building a new school there. And I'm not saying that's where the discussions would lead, but they could. And that's one of the biggest concerns that I have, is that it takes out what should be included in the discussion.
And it also, not that it has gone there either, but when considering John Marshall's approaching 100 years old, I believe, somewhere in that neighborhood, they did this to Grant, which is 110-ish, somewhere in there. To your point, Lance, if we can't build new schools on those grounds, simply because of the space and the inability to deconstruct the existing structure, what it may force us to do would be to move and build a new school completely out of that neighborhood. And I'm not sure that the residents all understand that, as well as what Jane talked about, the implications to the taxes. For all the reasons that were mentioned, it is much more expensive to rehab anything that is an existing structure dated that much than it would be to build new. And the students' interests, I mean, I understand, well, I guess maybe that's a question. Have we ever heard from the Planning Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, or the City Council, the mayor, anybody? Have they ever told us what they hope to gain by doing this? Like, what did they gain by doing this to Grant? I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm hoping something else.
Button.
I'll try to word this delicately. They are trying to protect the public interest in protecting historic buildings. There are 32 buildings in the city of Wausau that are historic landmarks, and the 32nd one was Grant. And they'll stand by their statement that they're trying to protect the public interest in preserving.
Has anyone, and I don't know if, has anyone called up and said, hey, we want to come take a tour of Grant because we heard it's a really cool building?
I don't believe I've gotten a request for Grant, but I have gotten a request for Marshall. And in most cases, the Historic Preservation Committee isn't all that interested in the inside of the building. The exterior of the building is what they spend most of their time. I've gone to most of these meetings, they talk about the architectural style, and its prevalence in Wausau and when it was built and how to preserve that. They don't talk about the inside of the building very often. And when we make improvements to the inside of the building, I don't think the city ordinance really has much to say about that.
Nor do they talk about the impacts of the students or the limiting factor that they place on the district and the community for us to have an impact on the students' education. Like you mentioned, Lance, how much it costs to renovate, and it's a handcuffing that I don't understand. Are we able to take legal action of our own against some of these measures?
In the ordinance, there is a hardship clause, and there's also an appeal clause. So even for grant, one that has passed the historic, the planning commission and the city council, it is a bona fide local historic landmark. We would have recourse. It might be legal. It certainly could fit inside of the appeal process.
Now, I know that you have gotten, or representatives were asked to come to a public meeting regarding this. Has anyone from any of these groups reached out to you, Dr. Hiltz, or you, Bob, and just said, hey, we understand you are the constituent impacted here. Let's talk through this and see if we can't arrive at some solution? Has there been any interest or discussion along those lines?
Not the way you just explained it, but they have invited me to come to the meetings. And as a matter of fact, at this last meeting, I was participating on phone, and they invited me to make the opening comments. And that's how we got to this point, because I feel I need board action so I can tell them definitively how the board feels about it. I will say things such as, we don't know what we're going to do with Marshall. At the time, we don't know what we're going to do with Grant. We're talking about some things. At the time, the Grant referendum was already underway. And I believe they waited until after the Grant referendum was done, and that was a no vote. This time I said, we don't know exactly what we want to do with all of our elementary schools. We're in the middle of community conversations. And that's where I left it, because I didn't have the definitive action that we're asking for tonight. With definitive action, I can go to the city council and say, our board, as owners of the building, should have a say in this.
Did they talk at all about the monetary implications?
Not that I recall.
So there's an interest to preserve it. Just no discussion on what it all means to students, neighborhood residents, taxpayers, what have you. I know I'm putting you in a bad spot.
I don't want
My
to,
apologies. I hear it. No, I hear you. I just think people need to be crystal clear about how this thing has unfolded and how it is going to apparently go down the same road as Grant. And we'll talk about the motion, because frankly, I think we should add to the motion that includes language, something about, we would consider legal action to allow us decision-making time. But
I think that I support the motion. I don't know how much weight it will carry because we opposed the designation at Grant as well. I think the more persuasive arguments will come from the John Marshall community. If they learn about this, to know what you discussed, Pat, that it decreases the chance of getting a new school, pretty much eliminates getting a new school.
Well, we could purchase houses as they go on the market.
Yeah.
And it increases the chance of the school building being closed and something being constructed elsewhere. It doesn't really impact the chances of interior renovations, which is also a possibility of the future discussions. But I would think the John Marshall residents would be concerned that of those other two things, possibly not having a school there and definitely not having a brand-new building there.
And that means if they don't have a school there, that those kids are riding buses.
Right.
yeah,
Being,
exactly.
being a resident of that area for many years, and all three of my children went through that building, I definitely understand the oldness of it, the historical part of that. But at the same time, it really does limit us when it comes to the educational needs of the students in that area. And I'm sure that the residents of that area would understand that if they understood what the Historical Society was trying to do, and understanding that it might take that neighborhood school somewhere else, like you said, Ms. Roche. The fact is that you'd have to buy land somewhere else in the neighborhood to keep it in the neighborhood. And so consequently, there's no land available. It wouldn't have been my house that I would want to have torn down to have a school. So I think this is something that, you know, the board needs to continue to be aware of as we move forward, because what's good for everyone.
Perhaps if the city council or whomever finds that much value in it, perhaps they would trade us City Hall for John Marshall, and we could use that. I suppose they didn't offer that up.
I think with all the comments we've had around the referendum and things too, that the taxpayers really are going to hit a big financial impact if this kind of thing goes through. It's going to really impact very, very directly. And it's not just the John Marshall area then when we're talking about the whole community.
Okay. Anything else? So we do have a first and a second. I am not going to make any amendments. I think the verbal statement that that's something we would consider until we have a chance to set a direction. Just know that that's something, Bob, that we will keep open to us as we go forward. Okay, so all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Bob. Okay, next item on the agenda, city water supply. Administration will share information on the recent communication from the city regarding our water supply.
Yeah, thank you. So when the press release came out, that was really our first notice that there was an issue. And so we kind of had to struggle. There wasn't real clear direction about the safety of the water quality. We've all read a little bit about PFAS, but we had to make some decisions rather quickly. And when people start talking about long-term health impacts, as you know, we decided to, in the short term, Mr. Seiler came through with his suppliers and got five pallets of water, six pallets of water that we distributed to the schools. And then we decided, we probably should better understand health implications, so we shut down the fountains. That has not been popular. We also can't afford to buy 6 pallets of water every day. That's about what we go through. It's an amazing supply, or a amount of water that we use as a school district. So, one, we just wanted to give the board an opportunity to discuss this issue, ask any questions, see if there's any information. I would propose that we've learned through, we have a pretty good working relationship with the city, and they've informed us that by the summer, they should have a longer-term solution to the PFAS issue. So if we can provide a safer, and I want to be careful with my words too, safer water supply between now and the end of the school year, I think that would be on us. That. Again, Mr. Seiler has identified an effective filtration system we could use at several of the drinking fountains at every school. It would be a lease situation that would cost us, total cost, roughly $28,000 through the end of the school year. And it would not cover every drinking fountain, but it would cover multiple in every school. So it would give them a filtered source of drinking water. So that's our current plan that we came up with in the last few days. Just want to know if the board has any questions or suggestions.
I guess I'm concerned that there was such a knee-jerk reaction. Did the city, the state, or the DNR say not to drink the water?
No.
Okay. And to put it in perspective and to scale, my understanding is that there's no regulation. There's guidance from EPA of 70 parts per trillion. The DNR came out with guidance of 20 parts per trillion, and we tested at 30.
Correct.
So we're between EPA and DNR, and there's no regulation as of yet. And it sounds like there's some long-term guidance yet to be available to the state and maybe at a federal level. And it sounds like the city has a treatment facility coming online here this summer that they'll be able to address, hopefully some additional filtration or what. So I guess now, if I heard that we tested at 700 parts per million or some larger 10-fold, 20-fold figure, that's probably something to be concerned about. But, so there's no recommendation from the DNR, the state, or the city not to drink the water. It's just, hey, this is a situation that we're monitoring and looking for, regulation and additional guidance on, right?
And there was a recommendation to limit the intake of city water. So what does that mean exactly? And so, again, in the short term, we did take fairly drastic action. It felt prudent at the time.
It sounds like there's some things ongoing with some localized filtration that will be put in place. And obviously, some other methods that people can take by bringing their own water. But I guess just to put it in perspective, again, when I learned that there is no regulation, there's guidance of 20 parts per trillion by DNR, and we tested at 30, it's not much higher, and it's in between EPA and so just to put it in perspective of where it's at.
Yeah, understood. It's good perspective. Thank you.
I think what's proposed is adequate rental, waiting for the city to come online with their new treatment plant.
Just so I'm clear on this for those keeping score at home, I guess, the press release was issued on Thursday, and from what I read, it was regarding some alleged misinformation that had been shared amongst city leaders that had to do with levels of PFAS in the water that are not in violation of any documented DNR or federal standard, nor has there been any stop drinking order issued.
Right, the DNR standard is a proposed standard, it hasn't been approved yet.
So that's what this was all about.
Right.
Yes,
The first we heard of it was that press release.
correct.
Okay.
And I think everybody needs to be clear that this is not just the water in the schools. This is all city water. So if
Correct.
students are drinking out of their faucets at home, it's the
Yes.
same water.
Yes.
I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Okay.
But I think there's a lot of people who think the school water is bad.
Oh, no.
So I guess my question is, what is our responsibility, legally, without a regulation in this area? Like, are we required to provide this filtration system at $28,000 for the remainder of the year, or this is?
Yeah, I didn't seek a legal opinion. I think in the absence of a requirement, we would not be responsible for that cost. It seemed like a reasonable, next step to, again, assure people of safe drinking water, at least at school, right?
And we could make it clear which ones had that and which ones did not.
Correct, we would label them,
Yeah.
correct. Mhm.
I think because we have this assurance that when the new plans come through the city, that this is a short-term thing, I think it makes sense to me. If we were talking about this is what we're gonna do now forever, like this was gonna be an annual budget of, $100,000+ then I would wanna do a much deeper dive into some of the things you brought up, John, of, what is the DNR proposal, and why hasn't it been approved, and what does this mean? But since we're just talking about trying to get through the end of the school year, and there's a lot of fear out there right now, whether it's, legit or not, it's there. So I think it makes sense too. I think it's a good thing to do to finish off the school year.
May I ask a question, Mr. Seiler? In the past, I know that schools have been doing this throughout the state where they've been putting filtration fountains in, and then students would come to those fountains and fill up their water bottles and that. Do we have the filtration bottle stations in many of the schools already?
So we have drinking fountains that have bottle fillers as part of them. Some have filters on them, some don't. those filters are not sufficient to take out or to mitigate PFAS.
Okay.
So regardless if that filter's there or not, it's not gonna get us to the end we're seeking.
Okay, Dr. Hiltz, do you have enough direction from the board? Or would you?
Indeed.
Okay,
Yeah, we don't need any action.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on, Education Operations Committee meeting. First item was recommendation of the 2022-2023 capital projects. This is an action item. Annually, a 3-year capital improvement plan is submitted to the Board of Education for approval. Larry Seiler, Director of Buildings and Grounds, reviewed notable projects recently completed, as well as the effect of alternate funding sources to provide context for the upcoming planned capital improvements. The projects planned for 2022 and 2023 are provided on the final page. Administration recommends the board approve the 2022-2023 capital projects and corresponding budget. So, to start, let me seek a motion to recommend to the full Board of Education the approval of the 2022-2023 capital projects and corresponding budget.
So moved.
Second?
All right, we have our first and second. Any additional comments? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, the next item is not an action item. At the January Education Operations Committee meeting, the board was presented with the 5-year fiscal forecast model for the district. The model is created using a forecasting tool within the Forecast 5cast budget projection tool. The projection model will continue to be applied during the next 4 months to aid in constructing the 2022-2023 budget reconciliation plan and ultimately the 2022-2023 budget. It is critical to understand that the projections are the result of many variables that independently change periodically. As significant changes to the projections occur, administration will bring them to the attention of the board. Any significant changes to bring to our attention? All right.
Not today.
Not today. All right, thank you. Okay, item number 3, this is an action item, the co-op agreement for boys hockey. At the January Education Operations Committee meeting, Dr. Rauscher presented a co-op agreement for boys hockey for consideration. I will seek a motion to approve the co-op for boys hockey as presented.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, and our last item under this section, Neola 30-1 policy updates. This is an action item. The board reviewed suggested changes to the Neola policies. I'm going to seek a motion to approve the changes to the Neola policies as presented.
I would like to hold out 3112.
I agree.
3112. Okay. Okay. Then what I will do is I will amend my motion to seek approval to the change, seek to approve the changes to the Neola policies as presented, except for policy 3112.
So moved.
Second?
Okay. Any other comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item 9, open forum, board member professional growth and
Do you want,
development.
can we, let's discuss 3112 and see if,
Take that first.
is that all right? See
If we can get it to come to agreement.
Sure.
Because there was just one line that we excluded when we adopted it in 2019 that got put back in.
Yeah.
That I want to discuss. Jane, haven't talked to you about it, but it may be the same thing that you're wondering about as well.
No, I'm talking about all the changes that it's too draconian.
Oh.
Limit us talking to staff members to get approval before we can talk to anybody. Lance, that means your conversations at home would be controlled, which you might like, but,
I don't think the policy goes that far. I mean, I looked at it to see if I could make it work that way, but it doesn't, I don't think. But I understand your concern. Yeah, my concern was that failure to do so may result in employee discipline. That is the standard Neola policy language, and there are other districts around that use that same language. DC Everest and Point use the same policy and use that language. I think we took it out in 2019 just because it's sort of, I don't know, it just kind of jumps out. It seems a little harsh. I don't think taking it out means that there couldn't be employee discipline. We have all kinds of policies that if you violate them, you could be disciplined for it. We don't add an extra thing in there that says, by the way, if you violate this policy, you could be disciplined. So I don't know if the end result makes a big difference, whether that sentence is in there or not. The appearance to me looks kind of harsh, though.
And Jane, you said your concerns go beyond just that
yeah,
particular sentence.
that somebody could be punished for talking to a board member. It seems like there's a deliberate wall that's being reinforced between the staff and the board. And while I understand chain of command, it can't be ironclad. It just seems too limiting, and I just think it's too draconian.
Is there any thought on maintaining the previous version?
We certainly could. The recommendations here were just those recommended, not required to be approved. I'll just give you a little feedback. As Lance mentioned, that failure to do so, mentioning employee discipline is a pretty common statement. And I, by the way, I'll apologize for not pointing this out because we had this conversation a while ago and I should have done that. The conversation that administratively we had was, would there ever be a circumstance where the behavior, where someone violated, this chain of command, would be so egregious that it would require some discipline? And there are some examples. One of the clearest might be, we have, there are personnel issues, performance issues in the district. If a staff person were to approach the board about a personal performance issue, that could create some due process issues. And so we would obviously, I think you know that we respect our staff and are not looking for any way to, take undue advantage. We just want to make sure that we, are able to manage behavior in the ways we need to. Lance, you bring up some good conversation, some good points, and I remember those when we had this conversation. We just want to get ahead of any potential issues instead of waiting for them to arise and have to react after.
Have there been any since 2019 under using the old language?
I'm sorry, I'm checking in the back. I don't think so.
Okay. Okay,
I was only here for one of those years.
Yeah.
all right. I was just curious if it came
Yeah.
up. I
Nope.
don't know how often it comes up. Okay, so what would,
If I could ask, I'm sorry, Jane, if you could help me understand your concerns, what language in here?
It just reads to me that, like, you are locked into this chain of command and don't step out or you will be, disciplined. And to me, that is just too strident. There has to be some flexibility.
Okay. And I guess, and keep in mind, the only changes in here are those that are highlighted. And so I'm looking at phrases like, this procedure is not intended to deny any staff member the right to raise matters of concern regarding district operations. So I see language in there that tries to temper any of that. Again, these are not make or break changes.
Yeah, and we softened it when we used the word encouraged instead, because the Neola version says employees will follow the established chain of communication, whereas we changed it in 2019 to say they're encouraged to.
Yeah.
And then we've talked in our board workshops as well, that we also then encourage employees when they contact us to follow the chain of communication. You know, did you talk to your principal? Yes. Did you talk to the supervisor? Did you talk to the district administrator? You know, if they talk to you and it still hasn't had resolution, then come back to. So we do that as well.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons why we softened that language to sort of have that same discussion or same language in the policy that we use when we talk about it in our board workshop meetings. And again, I don't think there was any, bad intent here with this proposal. This is a very common policy. In 5 minutes, I looked and DC Everest has the same words, the ones that are proposed here. Stevens Point uses the same language as proposed here. So I don't think there was any negative intent. It just, to me, seems a little harsh when I read that sentence, because we don't say that in all of our other policies anyway.
So is there a recommendation for changes to this one?
Well, I would be with Lance to remove that one sentence.
I would agree.
Okay.
Leave the rest of the changes, because then again, our policies are as current with Neola as they can be. Obviously, we have some of our own language in here as well. But if the board would be comfortable with that, we would certainly support it.
All right, go ahead.
I'll make that motion then to approve 3112 as presented, but with the removal of the sentence that says failure to do so may result in employee discipline.
Need a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a first and a second. All in favor of the changes to 3112?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on to open forum, board member professional growth and development report. Do any board members have any professional growth items to share for the month?
I do. I attended the state conference again this year. It was wonderful to be back in person. I went to many sessions, learned much, and I will give an outline to Pat, and he can decide what maybe the board wants to hear more of. And then I attended a couple of the referendum sessions. One was at West, when people were coming and going for their conferences, and then one at John Muir. And people seem to be pretty positive, so I'm hoping we're going in the right direction.
They didn't have any nuggets on how to make it a for sure pass?
No, but they did have several sessions on referendums.
Well, and
We
maybe,
were already into that. I went to a lot of trauma-related ones.
and maybe that is just good reinforcement for the public at large. It really speaks to how the state wants districts to be funding those things, which is why they offer sessions, that many sessions on referendums, so. Okay.
And WAS will continue to do that because that's very important for all of the 421 districts in the state of Wisconsin, because everyone's going to have to go to a referendum one time or another. To kind of piggyback off of Jane's comment about this, at the state conference, and we mentioned this, I think, at a previous meeting, talking about AAPI resolution that went through, I had follow-up from Lorna Young and Adrian Chan, Professor Adrian Chan, emeritus out of UW-Milwaukee, contacting me to let them know, to let you know, to the board here, thank you for supporting AAPI at the resolution and at the big meeting that we had at that time, because it's very important, as we've talked about in the past, as we move this forward, also moving Act 31 forward, and moving forward with the people that affect history in the state of Wisconsin. So they wanted to make sure that I brought that to your attention. Thank you.
That
Thank
was
you.
my update too. I attended virtually as the delegate to the convention this year, and just that all 10 of the resolutions that were presented did pass, overwhelmingly passed, and we have supported them as a board, and district, all 10 of them as well. So if anybody wants any details, more details about what those were, I have them. But
Thank you, and thank you both for attending. I know that obviously takes time out of everyone's already busy schedule, so much appreciated. Okay, hearing nothing else, we'll go on to the next item. Ms. Lowe, anything with the legislative liaison update?
Yeah, I don't have a lot. So there was a letter that Superintendent Jill Underley, she wrote last week as a guest editorial from DPI. So I'm just going to read it to you guys. So she says, "Dear Wisconsin families and educators, I'm writing this letter to you as a fellow parent and a former teacher. Like you, I know what it means to be involved with my children's education, and I love it. But I look at the way politicians talk about parental involvement, and I don't recognize it. Family engagement isn't about yelling at school staff or suing your school board if they don't do exactly as you demand. It's also not asking caregivers to homeschool or pay for private tuition if they feel unheard or unseen. Family engagement is about having a real conversation about and with our children. Like you, I build relationships with my children's teachers. I reach out when I need to, and they know they can call if they need to. As a parent, I love my children's school, and I see the ways our district works to involve all families in the entire community and how the entire community supports our school. It's an exchange because what matters most to all of us is what we have all in common, our children. Of course, this isn't what politicians mean when they talk about protecting parental rights when it comes to children's education. Rather, they're talking about micromanaging curriculum and preying on our parental emotions during a traumatic time, all with the ulterior motive of placing suspicion on educators by weaponizing lessons about difficult topics, or by placing blame on schools for a pandemic they did not cause, but are nonetheless supporting our children through. As to my fellow educators, you and I all know that this isn't the first time the politicians in this state have gone after our teachers. And as a former civics teacher, I know that teaching the history of this nation cannot and should not be done without tackling difficult topics. Families know this and support these opportunities for our schools to engage our children to become critical thinkers and critical consumers of information. We want our students to grow up and be active participants in democracy, and that means they need to know how to examine their past, think critically about their present, and make informed decisions about their future. This critical lens is what makes our democracy stronger, and the only way for our children to engage is through our public schools, and where this freedom to think critically is encouraged and the skill of thinking critically is actively taught. Teaching is our expertise, and we are happy to learn from parents about your children, just as we hope families are excited to learn the answer to, "What did you do in school today, honey?" when your learner walks through the door. I'm tired. Like you, I'm tired of the pandemic, I'm getting tired of this winter, and I'm really, really tired of politicians pitting parents against teachers when our children are the ones who get hurt in the end. Because they're the ones who matter most in this conversation and who matter most for the future of our state. And that conversation, how to best meet the needs of our children and students, is one I'm excited to continue having as a parent and an educator, and to lead as your Wisconsin State Superintendent. Sincerely, Jill. And then the second thing that I wanted to report is, so Governor Evers will be funding for drinking water testing. So on February 8th, Governor Tony Evers announced that the state of Wisconsin will use federal funds to help local municipalities test their water supplies for a certain kind of chemical, often referred to as forever chemicals. More than $600,000 will be allocated to see if drinking water is contaminated with polyfluoroalkyl and perfluoroalkyl substances, which can be found in products such as firefighting foam and nonstick cookware. And so that refers to PFAS and PFOS. So, and that is all that I have.
Oh, Thank you for both of those. Okay, moving on. Item C, Superintendent Commentary, Dr. Hiltz.
Sure. I'll just share that last Friday, I was over at Rib Mountain. The fifth graders did a live wax museum. I don't know if any of you ever had the chance to attend that. But they research historic figures. They memorize a short script about their lives and their accomplishments. They dress in period attire. They stand there until you push the button on their, and then they go into their. So anyway, it's one of those kinds of events that, you know, people really learn to understand and appreciate our history. You know, it touched all of the communication skills, all those standards. The kids had fun, parents were there, had fun. So anyway, we have a number of those events that go on. I just happened to catch that one. I sent an email to the principals today saying, hey, if you got something cool, please let me know. I don't want to just wander in and happen to find it. But so anyway, we've got a lot of wonderful opportunities for our kids, and just wanted to share that one. Nothing else to add.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, and with that, I will ask that the board member liaison district activity report be entered into the official record. And I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We'll take a minute here and just get situated before we will, I'll call to order our special meeting that will follow.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
See you, Jim.
Thank you.